Sergeant Steve Hansen was behind and to the right of Lieutenant Taft. He says, "We moved at a trot across the open grass toward the tree line and heard fire up on the finger to the west where we were headed. My radio operator friend, Specialist 4 Ray Tanner, and I crossed the stream bed. Captain Nadal's party and the 2 other platoons were off to the right. Lieutenant Taft was well forward as we crossed over into the trees. Sergeant First Class Lorenzo Nathan, Ray Turner, and I were close, maybe 10 yards behind. We were moving fast. Specialist Spec 4 Pete Winter was near me. We ran into a wall of lead. Every man in the lead squad was shot. From the time we got the order to move to the time where men were dying was only 5 minutes. The enemy were very close to us and overran some of our dead. The firing was heavy. Sergeant Nathan pulled us back out of the woods of the stream bed. Bob Hazen, Bob Taft's radio operator, recalls Lieutenant Taft got out in front of me. I was off to his left. He had the radio handset in his left hand connected to the radio on my back with that flexible rubber wire. It got tight and I pulled back on the lieutenant and hollered, "We're getting offline." He glanced back at me, turned back to his front, and took 4 more steps. Then he fired 2 shots at something I couldn't see what. Then he dropped face down on the ground. Lieutenant Taft was hit. I didn't realize how bad until I rolled him over. He was shot in the throat, and the round had ricocheted down and come out his left side. He was dead, and it was difficult to roll him over, even though he was a slightly built man. Captain Nadal says the enemy on the mountain started moving down rapidly in somewhat uncoordinated attacks. They streamed down the hill and down the creek bed. The enemy knew the area. They came down the best covered route. The 3rd platoon was heavily engaged and the volume of firing reached a crescendo on my left. At this time, I lost radio contact with Taft's platoon. In the center of that fury, Bob Hazen struggled and rolled his dead platoon leader over. He was gone and there was nothing we could do. The first thing I thought of was what they taught me. Never let the enemy get his hands on a map or the signals code book. I got those from Lieutenant Taft and was kneeling over to try and pull his body back. That's when my radio was hit and the shrapnel from the radio hit me in the back of the head. It didn't really hurt. All of a sudden I was just laying face down on the ground next to Lieutenant Taft. I felt something running down down my neck, reached back and came out with a handful of blood. Carmen Maselli was on Hazen's right. We knew what had happened. The word passed fast. They got Lieutenant Taft. Again, we're talking within minutes of these guys arriving. This is going completely sideways.